my god, hi! Welcome to Friend Crush. I'm Amber Akilla, and this is where I talk about stuff with myself, with my friends, and with you. How y'all doing? How am I doing? Oh my god, thanks for asking. I am actually in a good place, good in the sense that it's better than I have been this year. And I think in general, like, I don't really attach myself to any specific feeling. Like, I'm definitely an emotional person, but I don't define myself by how I feel, I guess. Does that make sense? I don't know. I feel like there's too much pressure to be attached to any given feeling at any given time when people are like, how are you? And I'm like, look, maybe I'm in a depressive spiral, but in this exact moment, I'm fine. You know, I don't need to be consumed by the way that I feel. And I think my emotions are my problem. I don't want other people to worry or to think that they need to do something for me because I feel good or bad. I don't know. I'm starting therapy. I'm going to talk to my therapist about this. But I just think, generally that's how I move in the world. And I think this year, particularly the first 6 to 7 months, there was just overwhelming negativity and suffering that we were either going through or witnessing, and it became much harder to detach and be present in that kind of environment. And definitely more so for me, it's like a mental state of being than it was physical, because I, of course, recognize how lucky and privileged I am to have been able to come back to Australia and be in a really safe environment that is not heavily affected by COVID in terms of the virus itself. I mean, borders stay closed in Australia, but infection numbers are very low in comparison to other parts of the world. But of course, like, I just feel so much for any first responders or frontline workers, healthcare workers. I can't even imagine having to work in these sorts of conditions. And, you know, the mental, emotional, physical toll. I wonder, like, whether thoughts and prayers really mean anything, but I think acknowledgement is due where acknowledgement is due. So, yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about. But, yeah, it's been interesting for me, like, being back in Australia, because I pretty much graduated from university in 2017 and then left within a few weeks of my graduation ceremony. So I've never really like lived and worked in Australia before. And then it's also like a pandemic, so I'm not really working. And yeah, I don't know, just very different energies between Shanghai and Perth. It actually took me longer than it should have to really get in touch with that. I couldn't figure out why I felt like at resistance with my physical surroundings. And then I just realized that the pace is completely different, because I generally consider myself pretty adaptable to my surroundings. And I guess on like a day-to-day level, I can do that. But mentally, it was like a big adjustment to just be back and here and trying to figure out how I can do things even when I technically don't have anything to do. But I am really grateful to be able to spend more time with my family, to spend time with friends that I otherwise wouldn't be able to see on a regular basis if I wasn't here. And at the end of the day, like, this will only be a very small part of my life and our lives, something that my mum keeps reminding me of, because I think when you're young, like, you only have so much life experience to refer to. So everything like a week or a month or a year is a greater percentage of your life than when you get older. So really, I just have to think like, okay, this is a year or two where I'm not able to be... So many planes today. Why? Where are y'all going? Can you take me with you? So yeah, I look forward to the day when we can look back on this year and be like, oh my God, remember that time there was a global pandemic? But yeah, I am feeling very grateful. I have been able to recenter. I think that was something that was really difficult for me to do. At the beginning of this year, it was just too much uncertainty, and like nothing good really comes from anxiety over things that you can't control. I can't control the spread of this disease outside of my own personal actions. I can't control when governments will open borders again. So I can be grateful for the situation that I'm in and accept that that's what it is for now and make the most of it. So that's where we're at. And isn't it a great place to be? So today I want to talk about cultural appropriation and conversations around cultural appropriation, how my own perspective on cultural appropriation has developed over the last few years, and just like with reference to random shit I've seen on the internet in the last few weeks. So for me, I think if anyone has been following me for a while, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I was more vocal about cultural appropriation. I think that's because I was still in Australia and I was experiencing more like insidious and also overt racism, coupled with observing this sudden like yellow fever that everybody had caught in terms of their aesthetics, just like the use of Asian characters on club posters, in streetwear, and especially in food. I think the mid to late 2010s, there was so much co-opting of Asian food by non-Asians, or like weird internalized racism manifesting as like a reclaiming of problematic slurs. I remember seeing a cafe in Sydney called Yellow Fever, but it was owned by like a Vietnamese couple. Maybe it still exists, but it's like their way of reclaiming the exotification of Asian women, I guess. The wallpaper in the cafe is made from like newspaper cutouts of Vietnamese women or something. I mean, to each their own. But at the peak of my annoyance or outrage, And this is before I moved to Shanghai. I just kind of realized that there was nothing that I could do in terms of these like small incidences of appropriation. Because at least in regards to food, like it's just not for me. White people aren't making Asian food to sell to Asian people. They're making it to sell to other white people. And that's going to have its own place in society, whether I like it or not. And I can support Asian-owned businesses. I can try to promote and encourage people to go to Asian-owned businesses. I don't need to be like dragging other people for it. I mean, I can call it out and criticize it, but I'm not going to focus my energy in that direction because that kind of takes away from me finding my own that takes away from me learning and discovering more about Chinese culture and Asian culture by denouncing other people for their misinterpretation. Or at least I think the two things should be happening at the same time and not just constant anger and like being triggered by things that you don't really have any control over. And all of these things are symptoms of a bigger issue that is, I don't know, comes from colonialism, Western imperialism, Orientalism, and those things can't be undone just by Twitter and can't be undone overnight either. Like the foundation of our society has been built on these things in the West. So for me, I now am in a place where I'm really lucky to have been able to live in China, to travel around Asia and experience Asia as it is now, and not just like through the stories that my mum told me about her time there, or through the lens of my grandparents who haven't lived there in over 20 years. So I'm really like more passionate about learning more about China and Asia than I am about denouncing other people that misinterpret it. And I think that's a privileged position to be in, because the violence towards me as an East Asian person, is very light, I guess, in comparison to other ethnicities and racial minorities. But that's not to say that that's not to like minimize anybody else's experience of racism. I just know that for me personally, it was bad, it got bad, but it was never like I had to fear for my life. So I'm grateful for that. So one thing that I did see online a few weeks ago was a Black woman who had gotten a red ink dragon tattoo on her neck, and she'd posted a picture on Twitter being like, do y'all like my tattoo? And then you could see that she had red chopsticks in her hair. And I guess Asian diaspora Twitter or Twitter just kind of came for her. I mean, it was obviously two-sided. Like one side is saying, oh, sis, you're appropriating. And then the other side is like, why are you making this a thing? And for me, I just, first of all, like wearing chopsticks in your hair, Chinese people don't wear chopsticks in their hair. Like chopsticks are for eating, And then there are hairpins that are specifically designed to be worn in the hair that maybe look like chopsticks, but are usually decorative with like gemstones or gold and silver. They're more like ornamental. So I guess wearing chopsticks that you eat with in your hair is kind of like mimicking or mocking Asian culture through a Western lens. But ultimately, like, nobody in China right now is out here wearing hairpins on like a mass scale on a daily basis. So it's a very dated way to try to mimic or mock Chinese culture. And obviously, I don't think the girl who posted this picture was doing it intentionally, just based on the replies that she was posting. And I think her neck tattoo is really cool. And yeah, there were replies talking about like, oh, you know, the Asian community supported Black Lives Matter and then y'all are out here doing this. And I just don't think it's the same thing. Like, police brutality, systemic racism against Black Americans and people fearing for their lives is not the same as hairpins, in my opinion. And even if you are offended by a person wearing chopsticks in their hair, that doesn't mean that you should not support Black Lives Matter. I don't think creating divides between ethnic groups or minorities is progressive. So yeah, sometimes you can just like take the L, but you don't have to make a big deal about it. Another thing that I saw was Rico Nasty tweeting Chink. Like, she had reposted her friend's tweet about her being high or about them being high and said like, oh, you with the chinky eyes or something. And then Twitter came for her saying she's a racist, and then she went on Instagram live to apologize or something, and then got a little too defensive and made it worse. But I don't know, I think saying chink is like probably not the best idea on Twitter for anybody that is a public figure. But I don't think that Rico Nasty saying that makes her a racist, period. You know, I think you can be like a quote unquote good person or a person that does good and says or does racist things, whether intentionally or unintentionally, recognizing your mistake and wanting to do better is more important than canceling somebody. And I think that women of color, Black women are held to this impossible moral standard when it comes to these sorts of things, especially public figures, because I just don't see this same energy being given towards men. And I think the ways that men are problematic in society, in the entertainment industry, are much more toxic and damaging than the ways that women are. Like, and most of the time you're not even seeing what these dudes are doing. Like, I really do feel like the most problematic people, the people that wield the most power, are not in the public eye for the most part. And the number of people or the number of women that cancel culture has tried to cancel in this year alone, and the things that they have been trying to cancel them for, it's just like, how will you ever make progress if you're going to yell and scream at women who maybe just said something a little off, maybe hadn't recognized their internalized misogyny or racism. I think most people are going to have that because society is problematic. It's been problematic. Humans are problematic. What surprises me is not that people are problematic, it's that people are only just realizing that they themselves are problematic, that the people that they look up to are problematic. And there's just such a strange dissonance in celebrity culture where people that are in the public eye are assumed to be better than the audience that follows them. And I just don't think that's the case for the most part, because even on a very basic level, like the amount of energy that it takes to pursue fame on a widespread scale or to exploit and develop a talent that leads to fame, think about how much time and energy that takes up. And for everybody else that's not doing that, you're either sipping the dumb bitch juice or you are thinking critically about different social issues. So I just think the idea that a 20-something public figure is going to know about the ins and outs of how society works and the issues that marginalized communities are affected by is just kind of, it just seems a bit ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't mean that they can't know, but I don't think that it means that they should be expected to know. I think, or at least people should just be more realistic, because yeah, this all comes back to like representation as well. I am not going to invest my whole identity into one piece of entertainment that features Asian talent and need it or require it to be an authentic and true representation of my experience as an Asian person in the West. I think it's impossible to do that. Like, I'm past the point of expecting Western media, Western entertainment to represent me and my experience or my culture like authentically from the gate. Given the context and the history that we're working with, where you have white people being cast as Asian characters with yellow face, or with white writers and directors working with Asian subject matter, it's just like, I think it's a journey, not a destination. And I don't think representation and diversity is about having people that will speak on behalf of a whole group of people. I think it's about allowing more people platforms to speak on their experience, you know? Like, as an Asian Australian who did not grow up in an Asian community, I don't really know what the Asian Australian experience is. Does it exist? I wouldn't consider it a monolith the way that maybe the Asian American experience is. And I know that a lot of Asian Americans do not identify with the general like narrative of the Asian American experience. And I think it's important to diversify that narrative rather than just have like a few signposts or people that are supposed to represent that. The more, the merrier. You know, like white people are not limited to their experiences because of their whiteness. So I don't think anyone of any other color should be either. That to me is what equity and equality and representation and diversity means to me at the moment. But I'm also open to that changing over time because, you know, before I would maybe I don't know if it's like take it more personally or attach more weight to things that aren't really done right, but now I can just sort of laugh it off. I mean, it just doesn't have to be that deep, because I would rather spend time watching BTS crack videos. Like, I just can't be bothered being angry. And yeah, I don't think Rico Nasty is a racist because she said chink. And I think that it's unfair to try to cancel her for that when it took so long for people to cancel someone like R. Kelly, who straight up is stealing girls and holding them hostage and like assaulting them and kidnapping them. And I have no doubt people are still playing his music and still bumping him in the club, still making babies to his music. And his victims were also Black women who were not being protected the way that they should be, because if it was white women that were being kidnapped by R. Kelly, it would be a whole different story. So I think for there to be progress, women definitely need to address internalized misogyny in order to, work together, uplift, support, educate each other rather than cancel each other. But I do think that one of the reasons why people get so worked up about these things is because we are so desperate for representation. Like, we invest so much hope in these public figures to speak for us or represent us. So whenever they do something wrong, whenever you realize that they are not fully aligned, their values are not fully aligned with your values, it can be really disappointing. And we're so desperate for representation, we're so desperate for change that maybe it feels good for those people to try to cancel somebody in order to feel like they're doing the right thing. That's not the approach that I want to take, but maybe a possible explanation for why. Like, I don't think men have this problem because you're not at a loss for representation when it comes to things that dudes can do, for the most part. I think there is definitely a lack of representation for Asian men in Western media, but there's not even enough representation for anybody to be cancelled like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a really weird time. I don't know. But I feel like cancel culture will continue to exist. And I will be on the fringes, observing and laughing about it and talking about it, because I can't lie, I don't want to be part of the drama, but sometimes it's more entertaining than some of the TV out there. I recently watched Sense8, which I have been posting about on my Instagram. And a lot of people have said that they also really enjoyed the show. And then other people have said that it's problematic and reductive in the way that it presents characters of color. And the Wachowski sisters are also problematic. And I think all these conversations need to be had for sure, in order to recognize how we can all do better. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that white people are problematic, regardless of their gender identity or their sexuality. I am not surprised that people would want a more nuanced representation of the characters of color, but I do think the fact that they're even included. And for me, they're given, enough character development throughout the series for me to feel like they tried, or for me to feel like it's true to whatever the show is trying to achieve. But I'm not watching the show and only having positive reactions. I'm still thinking critically when I'm not distracted eating potato chips to think about, the way that they portray a white male police officer, the issues that the Korean woman, the Indian woman, and the African man are dealing with, and how it does, of course, play into stereotype, but I have no doubt that they are issues that people in those situations would probably have to deal with. At least, even though I'm not Korean, I know that there are a lot of issues, especially in Asian families, that have to do with honor and making sacrifices for your family, there being a hierarchy between men and women as well. So yeah, I haven't seen a show that is like Sense8 before, that is shot in so many locations and that is, to me, able to kind of integrate a very diverse group of people in a way that seems natural, or in a way that shows that no matter where you're from, we are all still able to connect over the same things because we're all humans. That there is commonality to be found, even across languages, across continents. I think that's a powerful message, which is for the most part communicated in Sense8. I have no doubt that if you looked at it with a really critical lens, you would find problems. Even me not looking with a critical lens, I found problems, but I'm not going to expect one TV show to address everything with nuance. And when there are racist or homophobic jokes or comments made, I feel like they're dealt with in a way that is showing you stuff that people have to deal with and not normalizing it, because we do live in a very racist and homophobic society. A lot of people are racist and homophobic. So to have a show where you have a diverse cast and not have any characters deal with those issues would be almost more problematic than not having them there. Life is just triggering, period. So I think the entertainment that we watch is going to reflect that. Obviously, the way that it deals with those things matters, but that is a case-by-case analysis, I guess. I don't know. I'm very comfortable having conflicting feelings about things, I can be good, but also crying. I can be angry, but also grateful. I can be critical, but also appreciative. So I'm comfortable in the ways that multiple realities or things can exist at once. I become uncomfortable when other people expect me to take a hard stance on something, because I think part of life is getting new information and letting go of old information. And I don't want to be defined by one opinion or one experience, because the way that I view something is going to change over time. The more experience that I get, the more insight that I get, and so is the way that I feel. As we've just discussed, the way that I felt about cultural appropriation changed a lot, especially when I moved to China and was able to experience life and people that are Chinese outside of the very limited, very white upbringing that I had in Australia. I don't really have a hill to die on. I just want to live in peace. So, yeah, I don't know. I think everybody has problematic faves because it's just impossible to be not problematic in some way, whether to yourself or in the eyes of others, I'm very comfortable with that. I'm still trying my best, still figuring it out. And I think an aversion to change and development is very not progressive, and we should all be giving people space to do better. In the same way that in feminism, everybody is arriving to their personal empowerment at a different time, at different times. And it's important to allow that and create space for that, because you don't know what you don't know. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. And when you're growing up in a society that is misogynistic, racist, homophobic, classist, you're internalizing things that you're not even aware that you're internalizing. And whenever you realize that you have those things within you, is going to be different for everybody, because those things still exist even if you personally don't identify with those things. It's about creating space between yourself and those ideas and being affected by them. And you're often not really given the opportunity to do that if you're just consuming mainstream media, if you're not having tough conversations with the people around you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think because I grew up with people who, a lot of them didn't know any people of color. They didn't understand racism. And how could they understand it if they weren't able to experience it, if nobody else that they knew was experiencing it? So I think that put a lot of things in perspective for me. If you're a woman who is not friends with anybody that identifies with feminism, is not actively trying to empower themselves outside of the expectations that society has fed them, then how is that person going to know better? The same way that, an American, Australian, European-born Asian that is not in touch with the country or the culture that their parents are from, they're not necessarily going to know better either in terms of what may or may not be true to the culture that they're from, I guess. I can understand why people are offended by chopsticks in hair, because they don't have a wide reference pool for what people in China are doing to their hair, I guess. I mean, I've spent enough time in China to know that it's not that deep. And Chinese people would probably just laugh at you. Forget chopsticks in the hair being offensive. It's probably just corny at this point. But everybody has a right to be corny if that's something that makes them happy, at least for me. When you're getting to a point of putting on yellow face, talking in a mockingly Asian accent or taking opportunities away from Asians that could do the job themselves. Those things should be called out when you are perpetuating hatred and violence. That's when shit starts to get real for me. But these little things, I just don't really care about anymore. I just have a laugh and move on with my day. Watch this Chinese soap that I'm watching at the moment to try to expose myself to Mandarin. Go and make food or go out and buy bubble tea. Peach oolong. Anyway, I'm rambling. Do I make any sense? I can't tell. I hope everyone's having a good day. Let me know your thoughts. I'm always interested in seeing other people's perspectives. Doesn't mean I have to agree with you. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me. But, stay hydrated and look after yourselves. And I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.